Hello and welcome to the Neighborhood Money Podcast, a video podcast here to help you build a life you deserve. Drew, you know what? As we were prepping for this podcast, I was scrolling through Twitter, and I saw a feed and it talked about all the stuff that you learn in high school. And then it was all the stuff that someone wished they learned in high school. And one of those items was personal finance. And so that's what brought this episode idea up to me. And, now that we're going to go ahead and go talk about, what are the things that you and I both wished we would have been taught in high school? I'm really fired up for it.
Oh, absolutely. Looking back now at our high school years and even elementary, there's really no talk at all about personal finance. I think in our senior year, we had an economics class with Mr. Mostyn, and I know he tried formulating that economics class not only just on economics, but he tried adding some personal finance stuff. But outside of that, you really never talked about it. I think when we were in that economics class and we went through just learning how to write a check, or at the time buying stocks, but you just like writing on paper and then looking at the prices in the newspaper, which is kind of
Right,
funny.
exactly.
But even that time, nothing really sunk in. But looking back, those are about the only two things I can remember that were really focused towards personal finance.
Thinking back, at least in my life, learning some of these foundational personal finance things would have saved me a heck of a lot of money and probably put me through a little less stress. And so hopefully today with this episode, we can bring you guys some of the knowledge that we have, or some of the things that we wish we would have learned back in our early days as we grew into adulthood. But hey, if you guys are new here, I'm Cavan, that's Drew. Forgot to introduce ourselves. My bad. But I'm Cavan, that's Drew. And if you do find value in this podcast, please feel free to go out to Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star review. Write us a review. That helps us an awful lot to let everyone else know that this podcast is worth listening to, as well as if you're listening over on YouTube, consider subscribing to our channel. If you like this video, click that like button. That'll help the algorithm push it out to more and more people. And then last little tidbit here is drop us a comment down in the comment section below and just either say hi, let us know what your thoughts are. What are some of the things you wish you would have learned about in high school? All right, Drew, let's kick this thing off. Do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
I go first here. I think the first item that I wish I would have learned in high school was learning multiple streams of revenue. I feel as if going through high school and even in college, it was you need to get good grades so then you can go to a good college, and then you can get a good degree in a good job, and then you can make a steady income and slowly put money towards retirement until you retire after 30 or 40 years. And there's no talk about, if you are going to college and you're doing that, that's good. But if you didn't go to college, what type of income can you look at other than just a job? And so I think that is like a big one that sticks out to me, because doing more and more YouTube rabbit holes that I feel like I've gone through, you just see that there's so many different ways to make money, and there's so many ways to start off with some type of side hustles. And most of the people, I think, are just get so far behind and so far in debt that they don't even consider looking into those items. So I think that is probably one of the top ones that really pops out to me.
Get pushed through, like you said, the traditional way through school, college, job. But I also agree with you. I wish that there was more entrepreneurship exposure, at least. Just understand if, hey, do you actually like doing side hustles? Do you like trying to build additional income streams? Heck, I can't put myself back in my shoes when I was 18, 19. I'm going to guess that I probably wouldn't have taken a course like that. I was more interested into playing sports. But I think getting that exposure at such a young age probably would be super beneficial for many people, because it would expose them to say, hey, you know what? Maybe I'm going to go to college, but I can try to work on something on the side. Maybe I have a summer gig that I really like doing and I can grow that into a business, and it's a viable option. Drew, I think it's also interesting because maybe college isn't for everyone, or at least not the 4 year. We, from where we're from, we hear a lot about the trades. And I think that's another thing that kind of goes into this is, maybe not so much of multiple streams of income, but less or more so of not going down more of those traditional paths of the 4 year bachelor degree and then go get a job. Maybe a thing like a trade would be beneficial for you. And then obviously build some multiple streams of income would be a great idea.
Yeah, and even talking about the trades, I also wish there was like a nice support group that maybe was in high school or outside of that too, that would push people in more of an entrepreneurial spirit of showing like the options that could be there. So if you were somebody that went into welding, is we're very good at welding, it's like it would be cool to be able to, you know, help incubate or get minds thinking about maybe starting a side business of like, okay, I'm good at welding. I have very great knowledge and skill at this. How can I, make this into my little thing where I can help, repair people's stuff in my garage, or I can make, creative things and then sell them digitally or sell them online. So I think those are all kind of cool ideas. And then, to kind of go back to the other streams is like, not only are these streams potential side hustles and kind of active type of income, or hopefully like you're front loading them to have them passive in the future, but like even let's say stocks, like right now I feel like when you're going through it, they teach you to get the good job and then always go off of the employer 401ks instead of trying to have your own IRAs on the side or have your own taxable brokerage accounts on the side and investing in certain stocks that might have dividend income, whether that be a REIT or something like Coca Cola that has like high dividend yield, that you can continue to make money on the side and you're not completely reliant on just if you have a job or not.
So, what would you tell your 16, 17, 18-year-old self? s- Potentially someone that has no exposure to what even multiple streams of income are. What would you tell them to get to push them in that type of or in that direction?
Well, that's a really good question. I think probably one of the top things would be I'd be talking to my younger self and just saying, what exactly are you interested in? What do you have passion about? Uh, and then from there, we could help formulate of options of saying, all right, there's a good passion, there's this type of option, there's this type of option, there's this type of option. And that could be a way of, you know right now I think a lot of people we have on this podcast we talk to is like it's so important to have a mentor. So if you could be telling yourself in the past, it could be as like a mentorship and just being able to steer them in the correct direction.
Which makes total sense. And I also think if you can open the eyes to, hey, just having one job is one stream of income, but if you can have four or five, and I think the average millionaire has like seven or somewhere around there, that if you lose one stream of income, you're going to have, the other streams of income and you're going to be able to live off of those. And it's just a way to really truly build wealth. And I really like the idea of you finding your passion because whether it's mowing the lawn or it's going and cleaning houses, things that people don't traditionally think of as viable careers, you can make a really good living off of those things in addition to other uh, types of income streams, whether it's investing or things along those lines. Drew, I think for my first one, it kind of goes in the same route of you brought up college, and when we're in high school, college obviously was pushed fairly heavily on us. In my household, it was pushed fairly heavily on myself, and the big thing with college that gets brought up a little bit, but you don't really understand it at all, are student loans. And you and I both know, as well as our listeners that have been here now for the long run, know that I'm pretty passionate about student loans. My wife, Hannah, and I had a significant amount of student loans several years ago coming out of school. And it was just a huge roadblock for us in our early adulthood, specifically as we were getting into the workforce. And I can remember talking with my mom, and she had said, Kevin, try to take out as little of student loans as possible. And that was really the only exposure I had to, hey, these student loans are going to be a burden on you. And I really wish that in school they would teach kids more about, okay, what are your options for college? And I was a dumb one. I could have went to a junior college for free for 2 years and made money because I would have gotten scholarships and whatnot. But what are your options besides going to that 4 year and taking out $20,000 per year in loans? So what are those options? What can you possibly do? And then understanding, okay, when you do have 30, 40, 50, 100, $200,000 of debt, what does that actually mean? How much is that going to take out of your paycheck? What's going to be the burden of that debt? And not just, the monthly payment of three to $1,000, but it might mean that, hey, you might not be able to move into a house, or it might mean that you might feel financially stressed. And so that might not allow you, or it might make you avoid starting a family or getting married. And it can have a lot of consequences that those types of things just aren't brought up.
There's so many different parts to this one, in my opinion. And one of those main parts too is, I think you hear about scholarships in high school and you hear about student loans, but just like the names of them, like you can get scholarships, you can take out student loans. That's how you can go to college. And it's never really putting into perspective of what that loan actually is, how important those scholarships are for you to actually try to get those. I think at that age, you don't really have a grasp around what those dollar amounts mean. And you have this expectation that going into college, you're coming out with a six-figure job plus, and you're thinking, well, if I just take out this loan, it doesn't matter because I'm making so much money, then I don't have to worry about it because I went to college. And I think if there could have been some type of education on, you know, when you're taking out these student loans, you want them to be for your education and maybe like your housing to keep manageable. You don't have to live in the best apartment complex out there, and then maybe to get some food, but you don't really want to have all that additional parts for shopping or just for fun. And it's very easy. It seems like it's very easy to get those add-ons to your loan, and then you'd be like, "Oh, I'll just pay them back later." So then that brings like the next part of my thought process of another part I wish they could have educated on is putting into perspective what those loans mean for you and setting realistic expectations of what your paycheck might be out of college. Because if you were to look at what your paycheck would be, taking out some taxes, if you put stuff into retirement, you get health insurance, how much money you're going to be left over at the end of the month. And you're looking then at what is my loan payment. And then you can say, all right, after you have your paycheck, your take home paycheck, this is what you have to pay on this loan. This is how much you're going to have left over. This is the significance of taking out this larger amount of a loan. And I think put it into perspective like that would have been eye opening, I think, for a lot of people.
100% agree. I think to piggy off that just a little bit is when you talk about, the amount of money that a degree might potentially get you and the amount of loans that you pull out, I think that one is grossly overlooked. You look at a bunch of different people, and I was very fortunate. The career path I chose does return pretty well for the amount of money that I took out. It has a good ROI, but there's a lot of people that take out a considerable amount of debt to get jobs that just can't really and can't feasibly pay them back, at least not in any reasonable amount of time. I also went to school with a bunch of people that didn't finish their degrees, taking out 20, $30,000 of debt and not finishing the degree. And so now they're limited to the types of jobs that they can get. And all of that stuff just never really is brought up. So I would just add that, I've thrown a lot out there at you, but it's super important to understand what type of a degree you're getting. What are your options for schooling? Can you try to reduce costs by going to junior college, maybe taking a couple extra college classes in high school when they're free? And can you go to a college that is not the best of the best? I think about some of the school options that we have the university system in Minnesota, and then we have the state system, and the state system's significantly less, specifically even if you go to Wisconsin, and I know that's true around the country. And so, looking at what the actual cost of the degree is, how much you're going to make, and then realize that, hey, these are going to be have to be paid back. Uncle Sam's not going to come and forgive them. Maybe they might with people that currently have loans, but that's not going to happen time and time again. And so they're going to ultimately be your responsibility. So you just have to think through all of these different types of things and understand that student loans are a big burden for a lot of people, and try to reduce that as much as you can.
I just really wish that there wasn't. I mean, I'm not. I think having education's good, but I think going against the grain by me saying this, but I don't believe that college is necessarily fit for everybody. And that's what they push in high school, is that you have to go to college if you want to be successful. And I think that just not the case. There's so many people that I went to college with that didn't know what they wanted to do going into college, but they already took out their loans. They already were there because they felt like they had to go to college. Then they get some degree that they just don't really care about, but they knew that they could get a degree in it. And at the end of the 4 years, they end up either choosing a different career path that needs more education, or they pick a job that they didn't have to go to college for in the first place. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it'd just be nice if people could have had that realization before without the pressure of saying you have to go to college, because they're in a job now after college that they're enjoying or they're making a nice income off of, but now they have all these loans from a degree that they're not even using.
It's almost like there should be a gap year between high school and college for you to like kind of figure out like what the heck you want to do, maybe get some life experience in the workforce. Not saying that it's appropriate for everybody, obviously, because right, you think about like doctors that go to school for 12 years, like that extra year adds a lot. If you're thinking about graduating college now at like 35 or whatever it actually is. But totally agree with you that it's not for everyone. I think that college is very important for a lot of people, and I think it's very beneficial, specifically if you can do it right and you can reduce those amount of debt loans that you take out to go to school, because studies do show that people that have a 4-year college education do tend to make more money. But I think it's the loan part that is overlooked all the time and often forgotten, because you don't when you just look at the income, it doesn't tell the full picture of how people are doing, specifically now with how expensive everything is, how expensive cars are, and they're only going to get worse. So having those loans being as small as possible is my biggest takeaway from what I wish I would have learned back in high school. All right, Drew, what's your next one?
My next item would be kind of piggyback off of yours a little bit, but
A piggyback off of a
yeah, this
piggyback.
is like piggyback's inception, personal financeception. Uh,
Piggyback squared.
yeah, that's right. But it is learning more how loans work. And it's not only the student loans, but it's your vehicle loans or your house loan or your boat loan, whatever that loan may be. Even credit cards are in there. And the fact that when you go into a loan for your first time, you tend to just look at the payment, and the payment is deceiving because depending on the terms of how long this is, what are the interest rates, it's not really painting the entire picture. And you don't even look at what the total amount of what you're buying. You know that sticker tag, the sticker price is what you're buying, but you're really looking at what's the monthly payment when you're first coming out into your first couple loans. So I wish the educational system could teach you in a way of saying, there's a certain amortization schedule to each one of these loans. They make a lot of their money off of interest. Otherwise, they wouldn't be giving these loans to you. And that's how these banks are making their money. And your first beginning parts of these schedules are where they make their money. You're not even cutting into your own principal of that uh, price tag that you saw. It's just all going pretty much to the bank. And with that too, they don't really tell you on like these amortization schedules for, so this is my payment. I wish they would tell you of saying what makes up that payment. Is Did they fit your payment to make you happy, but that just extended the time that this loan's going to be out and you're going to be paying more interest on that? And what were those interest rates, or what kind of qualifies you for these interest rates? And if the time comes when you feel like I could refinance, is it even smart? Because you have to understand how the amortization schedule is. Do you want to be starting all over again? And are you going to be extending those periods longer, or are you going to try shortening them up? So, just looking at an amortization schedule on how loans actually work would have been nice to understand coming out of high school and college.
So there are three main things that I wish, off of this that I totally agree with you that I wish I would have learned. One is the interest. Like, how does that even work, right? Like, if you take out $1,000 and you have a 6% interest rate, what does that even mean, right? And what it does mean is that you pay $60 per year in interest. So that's the first thing. And then the amortization schedule, like you said, Drew, that one's a little complicated because it's my example with the 6% interest rate, but that's over time. And like you said, it's the majority of your payment, at least in the first half of your loan term, is going to be majority interest. And it's not till the latter half of your schedule, whether it's, a 6 year car loan or a 30-year mortgage, where you're actually putting principal back into whatever you had purchased and paying down that debt. So I think those, Drew, are two really, really big ones. And I know I said three, and I think the third one is, again, back to what I said about student loans, is what is the opportunity cost when you take out these debts? You're totally right in the sense that people, specifically the people trying to give you the loan, say, hey, this is your monthly payment, does it fit it within your budget? But it's more so of, okay, what's the total cost, what's the opportunity cost of actually buying this? And we'll get to my final one here in a little bit, but if I invested that, what does that actually mean way down the line? And I think all of this stuff kind of just evolves or revolves around each other in the own, the personal finance ecosystem. But I think that opportunity cost of taking out debt is really big. Its magnitudes, if you look how far down the line, specifically we've talked about car loans a lot, right? And if you buy a new car versus a used car in a traditional market, that depreciation difference is millions when you get into retirement. So yeah, those are my three things I wish, specifically around interest rates, that would have been more pressing, because I do remember hearing like pay down or pay your credit card off in full each and every month. Make sure you pay your bills on time, but a little bit more of a deep dive. Basically, what we've just talked about would have been really nice going into our adulthood.
Opportunity cost is a interesting one to add on to this item, and it really is interesting if you want to take out a loan, to ask yourself why it is you're taking out the loan. Do you really need the brand new 2020 vehicle that's overpriced in this market, just so you can drive around a extremely fast depreciating asset?
I think my favorite phrase is so that you can impress people that you actually don't even like.
Yes, that's a great way of looking at it. So, I mean, really having that opportunity cost is something too that's really not talked about. If you had that extra couple $100 a month, what could you put that towards? And are you wanting to go house broke or car broke just to do it? I guess just because other people are doing it. So, if you could have really looked at that extra $200 going into an investment account, or it's going into a a personal education account, and that's not necessarily saying higher education, it's more or less saying, as I've learned these more sources of income, or these passions I have, I can go guilt free into these things that would have seemed spendy before, but now I'm having those extra couple $100 a month that I've been saving up for. I had this bulk amount, and I think you're better off having that personal growth than you are having a, bigger house or a bigger vehicle.
Completely agree. And it's not reduce everything, right? We're not saying go out and just live with a beater car for the rest of your life, but maybe it's spending, 20% less on a car, or maybe it's buying 20% less of a house, or whatever it might be. If you're using credit cards, stop. But if you are, maybe it's reducing the amount you're actually buying on that credit card and then paying that off in full each and every month. I should clarify. I don't think that you should stop using credit cards. Just stop using credit cards and not paying them off. Just for the record. Just for the record. But Drew, I think that leads me to my last one, and that's compound interest. And obviously, this is a personal finance podcast. We probably like compounding interest is the number one thing, but it's surprising how many people don't know about this powerful thing that will help you grow your wealth tremendously. And thinking back, outside of the things we've already talked about, when you graduate, we were taught, hey, when you get a job, start investing into your 401k because you need to. Actually, they probably told us start saving in your 401k because you need to have money for retirement. But I really wish that compound interest would have been taught even before we were 18, like 16, 17, because at 18, you can open up a Roth IRA and start contributing to a your retirement account, or if you want to do a brokerage account, whatever it might be outside of retirement. But compound interest, the fact that you can put money in today and it's going to compound over time, meaning that your money is going to make money, and then that money that was made off your money will make money. So just for an example, like my $1,000 example, if you invested $1,000 and you got 6% return, well, you got $60 that year. If then in the next year you got a 6% return, you not only made 60, but you made 6% of the 60 you made the year before. And so that's going to continue over time. And the younger you start with investing, the younger you start to really start leveraging compound interest or using compound interest, the less you actually have to invest to have a sizable retirement account or early retirement and just truly just building your wealth. It doesn't really matter if it's retirement or not, but the power of compounding interest is something that I truly think everyone needs to know by the time they're 18 years old.
Kind of going adding like stitching together our last point and this point of talking about an opportunity cost and where those extra couple dollars are going, and we're also saying you don't have to, you know, eat dirt the rest of your life. It's just those early years when compounding interest is so important. uh you know, I can't remember exactly what the stats were on the point you brought up a couple episodes ago, but if you were somebody that invested from 18 to 30 and just stopped investing, you're going to be making a hell of a lot more than somebody that started investing when they're 30 till like 60. So you can have more years invested. But if you're at a later year, that compound interest does not work as well for you. And that person that might have had less years but started earlier can sit back and still reap the benefits because that money just keeps compounding off of every return year after year after year.
Drew, put that into perspective. So I'm 30. I just turned 30, a month ago. You're almost there. Can you imagine if once you turn 30, you no longer invested towards retirement because it was fully funded because you started at 18 years old, right? Can you imagine that great feeling that you would have? And I'm saying you generally, like, obviously, uh, things might be different in your financial picture, but can you imagine like what that would mean for everyone if they got to 30 years old and they're like, hey, if I just let this money sit, I'm going to have 1 million. I'm going to have 1.5 million. I'm going to have $2 million in my retirement that I'm going to be able to spend to live for the rest of my life. Then now I can spend more money on my life now. And so people talk all the time about traveling. People talk all the time about upgrading vehicles and maybe upgrading a house. And you can do those types of things because you don't have to focus as hard on retirement planning. Or if you're money nerds like us, Drew, then you just continue to invest elsewhere and you start truly building your wealth to heights that you probably couldn't even think of or imagine before.
You know, really putting it in perspective that way, I've always, from that, little example about stopping, is kind of more or less for the sake of the argument. But in all reality, you could stop then and you could have that extra money in your pocket. Obviously, if your huge goal is for retirement and you have maybe a certain dollar amount that you're really going towards, maybe you want to continue to contribute to it. But in all reality, if you wanted to stop at that certain point from starting earlier on, if that could have been something that was pushed from even elementary, just so it's kind of in your mind a little bit, and then going into high school, it's in your mind, you could be end up having that extra, 10 to 15% of what your take home was increase because you're not having to put that into retirement anymore. And that could be going into, like you said, into other investment opportunities. It could go into that nicer car that you have been working towards because you've been driving that beater and putting that money towards compound interest. So you can really treat yourself in the in the way they say in Parks and Rec, I think it is. Treat yourself. So no, it's a really cool idea, but compounding interest is something they definitely should teach in high school because there's no second opportunity for compound interest. Or what was a quote that we heard? It was like there's no,
Oh gosh, I can't even
I can't
remember,
remember
to
either.
be honest with you.
But it was like there's not really any second chances at compound interest. Yeah, you can start today and have it work for you, but all those years in the past that you didn't put it towards, you can't really get those years back.
It reminds me of the FIRE movement. So the FIRE movement stands for financial independence, retire early. And there's different ways to fire, and two of them. And I'm gonna butcher this because I am not in that FIRE movement at all. I guess I kind of am because I want to retire early. So that's probably puts me in that bucket, but I'm not as intense as the people in that community. But there's two things. One's called barista fire, which basically means that you save enough money up into your retirement account that you can retire comfortably, and then you just do kind of odd jobs or a barista type job for the rest of your working career until you can pull out your retirement funds. So that would be an option if you started early, right? Not saying that you would have to, but it definitely would be an option. And then another one is Coast Fire. And the difference between Coast Fire and Barista Fire, and if anyone's in the fire movement listening to this and I'm wrong, definitely correct me. But Coast Fire is what we have just been talking about is you have enough money in retirement account, you just let it coast, and then you spend your money on what you truly value. And probably spend a little more money on what you truly value because, like you said, you had been working so hard on building up those accounts using compounding interest.
Yeah, all in all, with these 4 points that we've brought up, they're all points that I wish we could have been taught in high school. And part of this passion project of this podcast for us is to do a little bit to be able to teach people what we wish we would have been taught. It's really amazing the YouTube university that's out there and just the rabbit holes you can get into. And you start to realize that the more you know, the more you don't know. And, something as simple as when I was younger, if people said they were going to invest in real estate, I'd be like, oh, they're a real estate agent and they're selling houses. And now, a little bit after college, or maybe even in college, you said, oh, I'm going to invest in real estate. I might have thought it was you had a rental unit or you were flipping houses. And now, the more I learned from that, it's if people say, oh, I'm going to invest in real estate, I'm almost like, well, are you going to be flipping houses? Are you going to have single families? You're going to have multifamilies? You're going to have commercials? Are you going to be wholesaling? Are you going to be Airbnb? Is vacation rentals? Are you going to be investing in land? And I mean, that's just scratching the top of the iceberg, really, because even in real estate, it's something that seems so simple as like, oh, I'm going to invest in real estate. there's so many different ways to do it. It's unbelievable. And there's so many different niches. And that's just one investment type. And if you can extrapolate that into any one of your passion projects, whether that is being in the trades or whether that's being a writer or whether that wants to be the investor or a social media influencer, there's just so many different branches off of those. And those possibilities should be shown to younger people and people even of our age that have not even thought about that. And once your mind opens up a little bit to those opportunities, it's all over but the winnings. I don't even know if that's a saying, but
Well, sky's the limit if that analogy didn't hit for you. But so to wrap up, the 4 points that we had is learning more about multiple streams of income, and that one stream, the traditional college route, isn't the only option. It can be one of many options. Student loans, and trying to minimize the amount of student loans you do take out if you go to school, or try to go without taking out student loans, because they can be such a burden on your life once you get into uh your working age. And even if you don't graduate, and if you're not making the amount of money you had, make sure that you're very aware of how much loans you are taking out. Then loans just in general, and interest and amortization schedule, and how all of that type of stuff works. Understanding how interest, you pay a lot of the interest up front in your loan, and you don't pay back the principal, which is the amount of money you actually took out to buy whatever it was, till later on in the loan term. And then finally, probably the biggest one when it comes to saving and investing is learning more about compound interest, and specifically at a really early age. So you can take the power of time, the power of compounding interest, to grow your wealth. So hopefully with those 4 points, I know Drew, you and I could have probably came up with a dozen, 20 more points that we wish we would have learned when we were in high school. But we truly think that those are the four biggest one. So hopefully that provides you a lot of value, specifically if you're in high school still, and you can take some of these thoughts and implement them into your life as you move out of high school and into college, or whatever endeavor you have next. Drew, I gotta be honest, it's so freaking hot in this office right now. I don't know if our AC is not on. Sometimes we turn it off throughout the day to, lower the cooling bill a little bit. But I've got this spotlight on me. If you guys are watching on YouTube, I've got a big spotlight on me. And right now I think I'm just sweating. But, with that in mind, it is summertime, and this is a terrible transition, but this is releasing on the 4th of July. So first off, happy 4th of July, everybody. Happy Independence Day. It's very excited to celebrate this great day of the year this weekend. There's obviously a lot of festivities that go on around the whole entire nation. Um, I'm actually heading up north to where we grew up, and I feel like the 4th of July up in northern Minnesota on the Iron Range is just a different world. It's second to none, and they truly know how to do it right.
if somebody is literally listening to this on 4th of July, I love my podcast, but I want to thank you for being one of the most dedicated listeners out there, because it takes a lot to listen to our podcast on the 4th of July. So I want to thank you for that. But outside of that,
Hey, if you are listening to the podcast on the 4th of July, specifically if you're watching on YouTube, let us know in the comments that you're like, hey, we're here. Happy 4th.
yeah, that would be great, because if you do that, I'm gonna give you an applause, no doubt about it, and I want to thank you again. But 4th of July, really, for me, it's the last couple years actually. So my wife has a friend that she met before we got together, and she started going up to one of the lakes, Crane Lake, actually, and she just was going up there just about every year. And then I started hanging out with my wife, and then I went up there a year, and now it's kind of just been our 4th of July tradition of going up to Crane Lake and staying at our friend's cabin. So I'm pretty excited for that. It's always a blast. There's a lot of good food, a lot of good conversations, a lot of good drinks. And I haven't looked at what the weather's going to be like this year, but traditionally it's a scorcher. And so hopefully it can be a little bit warmer for the 4th of July so we can hop into the water because I have not been up to the lake at all this summer. So being in the water would be a plus, and this will actually be the first 4th of July that will be going up there with a baby. So last year
Oh, okay.
they had a baby up there with their kid, and so now this year we're gonna have their kid and our kid, and
Nice.
hopefully he sleeps well because he's kind of been on, I think, a little bit of a 7 month sleep regression. I feel like there's
Yeah,
sleep regression for every month. But
you're not wrong. I swear it's like they've got one at 1 month, 2 months, 4 months, 6 months. Like, or are they just like under one? Or is that just like life?
yeah,
You know?
it's just like, yeah, they just won't sleep great under one. But I guess I can't complain too much. Our kid does sleep pretty good. But when they go back a little bit, it's always a little bit, I don't know, irritating or confusing, I should say. Uh,
Oh, sure. Like when you get back to the house from a vacation like
Oh, no,
that.
I meant to say, like, when they have, like, those little sleep regressions, you're just like, "I don't know where those come from." It's
Oh,
kinda confusing,
yeah.
but anyways, going back to the 4th of July, so we'll be up on Crane Lake, and I'm pretty excited for that. Like I said, it's always a great time. They normally always have a parade too, but this year being 4th of July on a Monday, it's gonna be on Monday, the parade, and it's gonna be at 6 p.m. So I don't think we're actually gonna make
Dang.
the parade this year. I kind of
Sure.
wish they would have just pushed it to Saturday or Sunday,
Yeah.
but it is what it is. I don't think we'll be making that parade. Outside of that, we should be doing a little bit of boating, a lot of eating. I think
Nice.
we're gonna do breakfast burritos one of the day that we're bringing. I'm currently making some beef jerky to bring up. I
Okay.
went over to my uncle's. Me and him were doing some stuff, so we kind of split the meat. He took half. I'm gonna take half, and
Nice.
I'll bring my
Nice.
half up to the lake, and hopefully I don't eat it before we get to the lake.
But it's crazy. Up north on the Iron Range, people just do 4th of July differently. I know we're going to parade on Sat or Sunday night. I keep forgetting that the 4th is on a Monday, but we're going on Sunday night. And typically at that parade, people are, having drinks and they have a street dance or whatever it's called after. And then they have the fireworks. And then Monday morning in the neighboring town, there's another parade with more drinks. And it's just kind of a wild type of weekend. And being from there is very fun. But I know I've talked to a lot of people that are not from the Iron Range, and they're like, "You guys do what on the 4th of July?" It's like it sounds like it's like this big old party. It is, but it's like a super very obviously a very fun party, and it's just there's really no better place to be on the 4th of July to truly celebrate Independence Day, and I'm so looking forward to being up there. And I actually haven't been up north for a long time for an extended period of time. So looking forward to having, a few days up in the Northland.
I feel like every time you come up, I miss you. It's like every time you come up
I
here, I'm like gone for some reason. So
know. I
unfortunate,
know.
I won't be seeing you. But the 4th of July up here is pretty awesome. There's just so many of the little towns that are so close by, and you just everybody from each town goes to each one of those parties or parades or whatever there is, and being surrounded by so many lakes, it just feels right for the 4th of July. You're just on the boat, you're having a good time, you're in good weather, you're doing some barbecuing, and then you hit up, the main streets that are closed off for parades. And it's weird because our main streets, it's like every other door is a bar. So there's always a
Yeah.
lot of people.
Yeah. More bars than churches. Oh, I also forgot that we are celebrating a birthday on Sunday. So, Nolan, if you're listening to this, happy belated birthday. I know I'll see you in a couple days,
Yeah.
but I'll shoot it out here on the podcast.
Yeah. And I think lastly, I think I could just bring this up because it's not something I would want to be doing, but my brother Matt is running for the Minnesota State representative for our area. So if you're in the area, vote for him. uh, but he is going to be walking in. It's like 6 to 8 parades. I think
Damn,
between Sunday and Monday.
that's crazy.
And I walked in a parade with him last week in Buell, Minnesota, and he was cut out to be this guy running for uh, this position because I mean he is very personable and he was running around shaking hands. I've never seen him move this much, I don't think, especially that fast, but he was
Yeah,
doing a very good job. I think he shook every hand in that parade, I swear. And I think by the end of this weekend, he's going to be a little sore and he'll probably drop like 10 pounds because the way he runs
yeah.
around and he's energetic about it, he does such a good job that uh, I think he's going to be a little tired, but it's
He's
definitely,
probably the most social guy I've ever met, to be honest. So it does feel very fitting that he's trying, or he's going down this
yeah, and he's
path.
so passionate about the area too, so that definitely helps. But as far as the 4th of July goes, I'm glad I'm not running to be a politician because
Yeah, six to
I would
eight,
not want to be walking in any parades and shaking
six
hands.
to eight. That's a
It's
lot.
funny that we kind of have a podcast that's broadcasted pretty much globally if you wanted to watch it and us being on camera because in all reality I'm pretty much an introvert and so if I had to go
Yeah.
around and constantly make conversations with people and shake hands, I think I would definitely struggle at it.
Well, I think that this podcast is making you maybe more of an extrovert introvert. So maybe someday, maybe we'll get a podcast float in the parade someday up there, and we'll just have neighborhood money, blasted across, and we can just go around and hand out little QR codes, and they
But
can scan and pull our podcast right
well,
up.
no,
Man, this
no.
is this is brainstorming,
Those
man.
could
This
be
is
like
brainstorming.
QR code magnets that we throw to people, or we throw them
Yeah.
like a little pamphlet on how to budget.
Yeah.
And give it to the young kids.
Exactly. I love it. I love it. I'm gonna write that one down.
Anyways, I think that can wrap up this week's episode. I don't know if this one will actually be any shorter than the other ones. I feel like every time we feel like it's going to be a short one, we just get into it. And I love that about this podcast. But, anyways, to wrap things up, there's some things that we all wish we would have been taught in high school, whether that is, budgeting or some stuff like we talk about between multiple streams of income, talking about student debt or student loans, or talking about just debts conventionally. And then lastly, compounding interest. Those are just four things that that stick out to the top of our minds. But really, if there's anything else that you guys wish you would have learned in high school, drop it in the comments below because we would like to hear those and then, give our thoughts on that as well. And for those people listening on the 4th of July, you're awesome and thank you. For the rest of your listeners that are listening afterwards, we want to thank you guys for listening too. And we hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you guys next week in the neighborhood.